This week on the show, we have DragonFlyBSD project updates with colo upgrades, future trends, and others. We also cover resuming ZFS send. We also have a real-time bandwidth terminal graph visualization for you. We also talk about how to fix Telnet fixes, a chapter on the FBI's history with OpenBSD and an OpenSSH vulnerability, and more in this week's episode of BSD Now. BSD Now, episode 309, Get Your Telnet Fix, recorded on the 31st of July 2019. Hello, I'm your host, Benedict.
And I'm Alan Jude.
Welcome to this week's episode, everyone. We have great headlines, pretty much like always. This time it's DragonFlyBSD project updates. They have colo upgrades for us and future trends. So this is the post from Matthew Dillon on the DragonFlyBSD mailing list, writing that for the last week I've been testing out a replacement for Monster, our 48-core Opteron server. The project will be removing Monster from the colo in a week or two and replacing it with 3 machines which together will use half the power that Monster did alone. Okay, so the goal here is to clear out a little power budget in the colo and to really beef up our package building capabilities to reduce the turnaround time needed to test ports, syncs, and updates to the binary package system. Currently, they write, we use 2 blades to do most of the building, and plus Monster sometimes. The blades take almost a week, like 120 plus hours, to do a full synth run, and Monster takes around 27.5 hours. But we need to do these 3 bulk builds more or less the same time. 1 for the release branch, 1 for the development branch, and 1 for the staging updates. It just takes too long, and it's been gnawing at me for a little while. And then the post continues with, well, Zen 2 to the rescue. These new CPUs can take ECC, there's actually an IPMI MOBO available, and they are fast as hell and cheap for what they get. So the new machines will be 3900X based servers plus a dual Xeon system that he already has at home, and the 3900Xs can each do a full synth run with 24.5 hours, and the Xeon can do it in around 31 hours. So that's much better time. Monster will be retired, and the crazy thing about this, Monster burns 1,000 watts going full steam, full bore. Each of the 3900X servers burns 160 watts, and the Xeon burns 200 watts. So in other words, we're replacing 1,000 watts with only 520 watts and getting roughly 6 times the performance efficiency in the upgrade. This tells you just how much more power-efficient machines have become in the last 9 years or so. So this upgrade will also allow us to do full builds for both releases and dev in roughly 1 day, instead of 7 days, and do it without interfering with staging work that might be happening at the same time. That's nice. And then there's a section about future trends. So that is about DragonFlyBSD having reached a bit of crossroads. With most of the SMP work essentially completing across the entire system, the main project focus is now on supplying reliable binary ports for release and developer branches. DRM, the GPU support, and other UI elements to keep DragonFlyBSD relevant on workstations, and continuing file system work on Hammer 2 to get multi-device and clustering going. Oh, exciting. John Marino pioneered a synth system for D ports and continues to help out, but his focus is on Raven ports for now. Rumvidas, Jacincas, and Antonio Hete Jimenez, have done a huge amount of work bringing D ports back into operational form and getting the FreeBSD ports sync stuff working better. Then DragonFlyBSD is still using synth and will probably remain on synth for the foreseeable future, though there's always some discussion about best to move D ports forward. It's an excellent build platform for us. And then the next paragraph is about François Tijon. Has done a ton of work taking DRM up to Linux 4.7.10, and this has worked very well for the Intel iGPUs. We're now finally starting to dive into Linux's AMD GPU subsystem, which is much older in order to modernize our AMD support, which is still deficient, they write. Numerous other people have spent a considerable amount of time helping test GPU support and tracking down bugs. This work is ongoing. And Right now, there's a section about Hammer 2. Right now, Hammer 2 makes for an excellent single-device file system extremely well, given that it supports writable snapshots and compression out of the box, but it remains deficient when it comes to expandable storage, multiple devices, and clustering. This will be active work for me, but honestly, the AMD GPU support has to come first, so it's still going to be a long haul for Hammer 2. The rest of the post is basically, there's a long list at the end with the people involved and thanking them. So it's a long list that you have to scroll through so you can see how many people were part in this and were involved. Although there are a couple of duplicates here. Do you see that? There's 3 times Michael Newman. Why isn't that uniquified? See that? There's a couple of duplicates in this one.
Yeah, I see it. There is.
Well, they have to thank those people multiple times, I guess. Yeah, and so they close it with that it's hard to say how the future will develop. There are only 3 open source operating systems in the entire world that really pulled it together on having a complete modern SMP kernel. Linux, DragonFlyBSD, and FreeBSD. And that's it. We also have NetBSD and OpenBSD, and I kind of like to know what their plans are, because the future is clearly going not only multi-core, but many-core, Matthew writes, but for everything. But as I like to say, for SMP, there are only 3 at the moment. One can't dispute that Linux has nearly all the eyeballs and Dragonfly has very few, but open source tends to live on forever and algorithms never die. I think there's a place for all of these projects, and there really aren't any alternatives if you want a sparkling clean system that doesn't have too many layers of abstraction. At the current juncture, DragonFlyBSD is doing well, and there are no plans to slow down or stop. Yeah, and then that's basically the list of people. So yeah, it seems like DragonFlyBSD is not only getting more performance out of their build boxes, but also saving up some watts in the process.
So our next story is from our friend Marius about resuming ZFS sends. He says, one of the amazing features of ZFS is the possibility to send an entire dataset from one place to another. So basically, the ZFS send command can serialize the file system or block volume or any storage in ZFS into basically the stream format that you can store and receive later or receive immediately, but it recreates the same file system on the other side. It says this mechanism is amazing to create backups of your ZFS-based machines, although there are some issues with the functionality for a long time when a user sent a big chunk of data. What if you want to do that over the network and your connection might disappear? What if your machine was rebooted as you are sending the snapshot? So up until a couple of years ago, if you were doing a ZFS send and it was interrupted, you had to start over at the last snapshot that was complete. So if you didn't have very many snapshots, or if you wrote data really fast, you might have the difference between 2 snapshots might be 500 gigabytes of data. And if your internet's not very fast, that takes a long time to send. And when it gets to 80% complete, and then your connection gets interrupted, or the Wi-Fi goes down, or you run out of battery, or whatever, that was really annoying and painful.
Start over, yeah.
Yeah. For a very long time, you didn't have any options. You had to send a snapshot from the beginning. Now, this limitation was already bad enough. However, another downside of this approach was that all of the data which you had already sent was thrown away. So yeah, if you were up to 80% complete sending that snapshot, as soon as it was interrupted, ZFS would be like, oh, well, that's never going to finish. Let me just throw away that, 400 gigs of data. Therefore, ZFS had to go and send all this data over again. So imagine terabytes of data sent over the network, and you were almost done, and you stop, and then you have to actually delete all that data for no reason, and then resend it later. So in this short post, I don't want to go over the whole ZFS snapshot infrastructure. If you think that such a post would be useful, do leave a comment. He says, now to get back to the point, this infrastructure is used to clone the datasets. Some time ago, a new feature called resuming ZFS send, or resumable, was introduced. This means that if there was a problem transmitting a snapshot from one point to another, you could then resume it and pick up where you left off. So this means when it gets disconnected, it doesn't throw away the partial version, and it gives you a token you can use to resume.
Yeah, much better.
But the point is, you finally have this choice. So let's look at an example. So here he does ZFS list and sees he has a test data set that's 7.21 gigabytes. As you probably know, you can use ZFS send and then ZFS receive to send and receive the datasets. You can send the whole dataset or just a snapshot. Sending snapshot is much handier than sending the whole dataset, since you can do incrementals. First, when we send snapshots, the dataset doesn't have to be unmounted. In the case when the send dataset, it has to. Another advantage is that we can send data incrementally from one snap to another. So that way, you can send daily snapshots of your laptop back to your NAS, and that way you don't have to resend all the data every time, only what's changed each day. So in the most simple example, you can see he does ZFS send of tank/test to tank/new test. And you let that run for a couple minutes, and then it's there. While that's happening, you can run ZFS list, and you can see that data set growing and growing. But if it gets interrupted, then you look, and suddenly that whole data set has just disappeared because it didn't complete. The whole amount of data sent, which in this case was about a gigabyte, was thrown away by ZFS because ZFS didn't think we'd be able to resume this. So if you want to tell it that you want to reuse resume, because it's a newer feature, you have to enable it. When you do ZFS receive, you provide the -s flag, and that will make a resumable send. So this time, while we're sending and we cancel it, we see the dataset stays, and we get this 1.1 gigabytes of data. And if you do a ZFS get on that dataset, you'll see it has a property called resume token, or receive resume token, which is this big long string. And encoded in that string is basically the name of the dataset, the snapshot you're starting from, and how far through that snapshot you are. So now, when you do ZFS send with -t and that token, ZFS will pick up where it left off and send the rest of that replication stream. So when we do that, we can finish the replication and be done. Now, what if you decide you don't want to finish that replication? So you have gigabytes of data sitting there waiting to be resumed, and maybe you've deleted the snapshot on the source, or you just are never going to resume it. And then you want to do ZFS receive -A, and then the name of the dataset, and that will abort the resumable send and will delete the half replicated bit. So yeah, if the send process was interrupted and we ask ZFS not to clean up the data, we have to manually do the cleanup. The resumable option works only with individual datasets. So if you do a recursive send, where you're sending multiple datasets, when you resume, it'll finish the one it was in the middle of, but it won't do all the later ones because you could have added or removed datasets in between, and it can't possibly know how to resume all that.
Yeah, the tracking of those would take extra work.
Yeah. So ZFS resumable send is very interesting and straightforward, but can save you a lot of time and bandwidth.
Oh yeah, a lot of people were thankful to have that feature.
Yes, I remember when I was replicating the FreeNAS downloads to like Australia and Singapore, which are very far away, and that data set is over 500 gigs. And most importantly there, bandwidth in Australia is expensive.
Yeah.
So sending 400 of the 500 gigs, being charged, 10 cents a gig for it. So, now you're at you spent $4 and then it was for nothing and you have to send it all over again and again. And it just seems like it'll never complete. Whereas with the resume, it was able to pick up where it left off and work very nicely.
Saving you the money. Yeah.
Yes.
Very nice. Yeah. So that's another cool article from Marius' blog. Maybe if you have time, Marius, you could actually give us more details about how ZFS send works internally, or some other ZFS features that would be always nice to cover in a future show.
Yeah. If you are interested in that, one of the cool tools that comes with ZFS is Z Stream Dump. If you do a ZFS send and instead of receiving it, pipe it into that tool, it will give you a more human readable version of what it's sending. And then as you add more and more -v's for verbose, it will give you more and more information until you can't possibly read it all.
Yeah, that's what the developers originally used or are still using for debugging streams.
Yes. I have a bunch of patches for it that I'm in the middle of upstreaming that provide more interesting statistics at the end of the send and so on.
Yeah, if you just make a snapshot of a text file, and then change the text file, do another snapshot, then if you do the stream dump between the two, then you can see what changed in the text file in this dump output. All right, now it's time for our news roundup this week. We have found something interesting for the people who are into visualizations, because we have real-time bandwidth terminal graph visualizations, apparently, over at dataswamp.org. We covered them a couple of times. They have some interesting articles. And this time they have the real-time bandwidth terminal graph visualizations. If for some reason you want to visualize your bandwidth traffic on a terminal, in or out, in a terminal with a nice graph, here's a small script to do so, involving TTY-plot, a nice software making graphics in a terminal. Graphics in like ASCII pictures, remember those? The following will work on OpenBSD. You can install TTY-plot package _add TTY-plot as root. TTY-plot package appeared in OpenBSD 6.5. And for Linux, there's also a TTY-plot. Well, this website is pretty much for all the Unixes or operating systems out there. It's not just for Linux. So the website contains tons of examples. That's TTY-plot on github.com. And they have a nice example. It reminds me a little bit of Ministat, the Ministat output a little bit.
A little bit. So I use a similar tool called nload that does a similar thing, but can also do... It does it per interface, but this tool also looks quite useful.
They describe a little bit how to use the command. Like they will have a trunk 0 with inbound traffic as the interface to monitor. And there, at the end of the article is a command to display both the in and out traffic at the same time. And they also have instructions for customizing as you need.
Okay. So I see. So TTY-plot is a generic tool for graphing, and then they're using netstat and some awk to make the right format to then plot it. That's cool. But you might want to check out nload, which is also available on all the Unix type operating systems. It's a lot less to type. You just do nload, the interface name.
Less awking in between. So with TTY-plot, you can not just plot network bandwidth, but also like, numbers, text files, anything that might be worth plotting.
Yeah, anything. That's very useful. I'm going to have to bookmark that.
Is that also in FreeBSD ports?
I would imagine so. It's on GitHub, so it could easily be.
Someone who has time to port something, there is always another software out there that could be part of the ports collection. Or, it doesn't seem so. Okay. We have a wanted ports page on the FreeBSD wiki that we can happily edit and people will pick it up. All right, so check it out and then start visualizing your bandwidth. In another similar term, we have the old thing called Telnet. There's a blog post from Ted Unangst called Fixing Telnet Fixes. Remember Telnet you shouldn't use?
Yep. So they say there's a FreeBSD commit to Telnet to fix a couple of SN printf buffer overflows. It's received a bit of attention from various reasons. The fact that there's Telnet in 2019. So I thought I'd take a look and hear a few random observations. Here are 3 lines after the patch where they created an unsigned integer called bufflen, which is the length of the buffer plus the length of the control code plus 1. And so then they make a memory buffer that big and then print those 2 strings concatenated together into it. And they note some interesting observations about it. Number 1, the first line is indented with spaces, while the others use tabs, which is weird. The correct type for string length is size t, not unsigned int. The size of character is always 1. There's no need to multiply it by the bufflen. If you do need to multiply by a size, that's an unsafe pattern. You should use calloc or something similar, or like realloc array used in OpenBSD. Return value of malloc doesn't need to be cast. In fact, it should not be, lest you disguise some warnings you might get. And the return value of malloc is not checked for null in case memory allocation fails. And there's no reason to cast the character pointer variable to character pointer when passing it to smprintf if it's already that type. And if it weren't, then what were you doing in the first place? And then the whole operation could probably be simplified by just using asprintf, which will do the allocation automatically for the right size. They say, although unlikely and possibly impossible here, adding the 2 source lengths together can overflow, resulting in truncation, which would go unchecked in that smprintf call, whereas asprintf avoids this particular failure case. It turns out that the Telnet client is still useful. I'm glad that we're not spending a lot of time on the Telnet server.
Yeah.
The Telnet client is still useful, although I admit that most of my use of it is actually abuse of it, using it for things that aren't necessarily Telnet. Yay, for finger memory, eh?
A lot of things can be done with Netcat nowadays that is a good replacement for Telnet. Okay, yeah, so speaking of OpenBSD, since Ted Unix is an OpenBSD developer, we found a chapter from the FBI's history with OpenBSD and an OpenSSH vulnerability. This originally came in as a tweet, I guess. Yep. So the tweet goes, earlier this year, I FOIA it the FBI for details on allegations of backdoor installed in the IPsec stack in 2010, originally discussed by OpenBSD devs, and there's a link to the mailing list post. Today, I got an interesting but unexpected responsive record and uploaded that. Of course, as you might think, there are a lot of things blacked out. There's a link to the document or to the reply. Yeah, so this is based on the Freedom of Information Act. And here's the original request to whom it may concern, blah, blah. Pursuant of the Freedom of Information Act, I hereby request the following records. And can I see that? Ah, yes, there's the scan of the reply. No, it's not actually not. It is a scan, yeah. So it has all the cool stuff like FBI logo.
But there's a bunch here where they're talking about a routine message from the FBI Chicago field office being sent to Australia and Canada to ask for any additional information they might have.
So like the cross information, they pull all that together to have that as the full reply, I guess, or full reply.
So looking at the heavily redacted bits here, it starts off, the concurrent version system, CVS, for OpenBSD operating system has been compromised as a result, blacked out. An OpenSSH exploit, blacked out, has been discovered. This seems to be 2002.
Okay, so that's quite a while ago.
It says OpenBSD was compromised through the internet host cvs.openbsd.org or ftp.openbsd.org, both located in Canada. Blank claimed on the IRC channel, blank, which he connects to from the internet hosts in Australia, to have committed the hack. And then a bunch of blanked out stuff.
I mean, besides the blanked out parts, it's interesting to see the form they use or the kind of structure of the document, like how much it's very formal. It's very, of course, it's very, very much a bureau, but it's kind of interesting how they collect that information and present that internally, even though we see all the interesting bits that are blacked out. But kind of the structure is interesting to me, like how they stored all that or provide these records for themselves.
But it looks like the only thing they have here is the FBI's investigation into when a host at OpenBSD was compromised back in 2002. Basically, the FBI trying to find out who did the hacking.
Ah, yes, yeah. And was there any conclusions or follow-up to that?
No, it seems like the only file that we got access to was the FBI's request to Australia and Canada for more information, and I think they wanted them to interview people. It's a little hard to tell with all the redactions.
Yeah, the interesting bits are missing, so it's hard to guess what they were after. Yes, and then it's the closing letters. 3 pages were reviewed and 3 pages are being released. Yeah, with some legal advisement at the end, enclosures.
But yes, so the problem back in 2002 is public information. So, nothing surprising.
Yeah, and I guess OpenBSD folks have put enough scrutiny on that code in question, or have rewritten it by now 3 times.
Over the last almost 20 years, sure.
Yeah. So I guess the exploit is that is not available anymore or not possible. But who knows what else is lurking.
Yeah, I don't think it's been possible since 2002, actually.
Yeah. But yeah, it gave an interesting insight to me, at least, into, how these records are stored and how such a file might look like, something that you won't see every day.
Yeah, although I do question a little bit why some of it was redacted, although some of that might actually be to protect the identities of people who spoke to the FBI or were interviewed or whatever. You don't want to cause people in OpenBSD consternation by saying that they talked to the government or something.
Yeah, quite true. All right, here are our Beastie Bits this week. We have the first, second edition. Well, that sounded wrong. No, it's Pseudomastery 2nd edition, open for tech reviews. I wanted to say it's the first part of the 2nd edition, but that didn't got together too well. So this is over at Michael Lucas's blog, and he writes that he finished the first draft of the new Pseudomastery last night and spent today polishing up for tech review. That's from mid-July, so that's already done. If you want to do a tech review, this is your chance. Send an email to mwlucas@michaelwlucas.com telling me what you want to review, and you won't make the manuscript possible.
No, public.
Yeah, public. He needs all reviews back by August 5th, so that's by next week, this time this episode comes out. This gives me time, if everything goes well, to have the book in print for VBSDCon, which is the first week of September. Assuming they accept my proposal, that is.
Side note, we did.
Yeah.
That's coming up in a later story in the show.
Yeah, stay tuned. As a side effect of that, he'll be closing both the print sponsorships and ebook sponsorships in the next 24 hours, so that's already done. But today, in this one, he'll be posting about gelato. Yeah, as he usually does. So yeah, that seems like a new book coming out very, very soon with updates in the pseudo area. And of course, we can't wait to get our hands on that.
Next up, we have a reminder. The FreeBSD journal is now free to everyone. And if you check out the latest edition that came out, the May-June edition, and it's focusing on makers and do-it-yourself projects, including the BeagleBone Black, Raspberry Pi, and some others. If you're ready to get your hands dirty, dive right in. The FreeBSD journal is free to readers online with the links from the FreeBSD Foundation's website.
Yeah, just grab it and read it.
Stories in this version include Introduction to Hardware Hacking on FreeBSD. If you're really interested in that, Tom will also be teaching it as a tutorial with the hardware included at EuroBSDCon in September.
Yes, yeah. I guess a lot of people signed up.
Then they also talk about how to run a media server on not a Raspberry Pi, but other ARM devices. Then somebody is talking about running a Singa 2 on a Raspberry Pi 3.
Yeah, some crazy guy who's running that for a number of months now, stable.
Then they also have a letter from the Foundation, We Get Letters column from Michael Lucas, which is always humorous, the conference report, a new Faces of FreeBSD article, the SVN update, and the upcoming event calendar.
Yeah, so these are regular columns that are in each episode, or in each issue, but each issue has a main theme that authors are writing about, and Yeah, if you are interested in writing for the journal, then get in touch. They're always looking for authors. We're also looking for people who could review books, and that will also be then an article in an upcoming issue.
And the July-August issue will probably be out in a couple of weeks.
I missed the last editorial board meeting, but I think we're in a good shape to give it to you soon. We'll make an announcement on the journal's Twitter account or on the Foundation's website when that is happening.
What it'll be about is already there, right?
Usually we plan at BSDCan the next year's editorial, so the main topics are there, so we can publish those already, but we cannot publish yet what will be in each issue, since we have to hunt down writers.
The plan for the July-August issue is for it to be about containerization, so jails and such.
Yeah, things of that nature, and we'll definitely have a nice issue coming up again.
Yep, and then we have in the roundup here a post from OpenBSD and NetBSD machines at the Open Source Conference 2019 in Nagoya. The Japanese NetBSD user group and the Nagoya BSD user groups held booths at the Open Source Conference earlier in July, and they have lots of pictures.
Ah, yes, from cool machines, old and new.
Yes, like this table literally has almost no blank space on it. The little bits that are not covered in hardware are covered in Run BSD stickers.
That's how it should be. Ah, yes.
Yeah, they have a Luna 88K running OpenBSD, lots of other cool stickers, and just heaps of interesting hardware.
Ah, yes, that reminds me of Asia BSDCon. They always have a table there with cool hardware that you normally don't see.
They also had a Raspberry Pi 3 running FreeBSD, doing something interesting that I can't read in Japanese.
Yeah, that's our loss.
They had a Ryzen system running NetBSD, some tablets running NetBSD, a Pinebook running NetBSD, a bunch of other stuff, and an official NetBSD tourist guide.
Oh, that's interesting.
Lots of interesting stuff. So if you're interested in seeing some of the pictures of that fun hardware you often can't get anywhere but in Japan. Oh, they also have a little Mastodon client running on the Luna the Luna 88K and such. It's quite interesting. So the tourist guide seems to have stuff from the mailing list with this, like all the disk images and so on that were used for the different machines. So if you saw something interesting you wanted to build yourself, the recipes are mostly there as well.
Oh, so you can run it on your own if you have the hardware. So next up is something for the gamers out there. We have, like we mentioned in an earlier episode, Wine now running well enough on FreeBSD 12.0 that it allows gaming. And here's a YouTube video that shows that.
Yes, over the 24 minutes, they appear to play at least 10 different games that I recognize.
Yeah, I saw a couple of tweets.
There's one here with the ship. Yeah, I'm not sure what that one is. And then I see some Counter-Strike. This one looks like Call of Duty. Some RPGs. I'm not even sure what that one is. Some kind of farm simulator.
Yeah, well, it works, so just farm away.
Golf. Something that looks like Grand Theft Auto, but in German, I think.
Of all languages.
This looks almost like it's Left 4 Dead. Might be, actually.
Oh, that's not too old.
I recognize some of these games, but not all of them. There's some... That game just got Stickmen in it. Skyrim. Some puzzle games. Lego game of some kind. Lots of other games.
There's plenty of choice of genres, so it's not just Diablo or real-time strategy. So, yeah. It's working now, so you might be a bit late to the game, literally, but it's there. It works. So if you have some free time, then by all means, do gaming on FreeBSD. And then we have something from Package Source Con 2019, Introduction to the Structure and Interpretation of TNF, the NetBSD Foundation.
Yes, this is from Thomas Klausner, who's been a NetBSD and package source developer for 19 years. Over time, he's been part of almost every committee in NetBSD. He's part of the package source PMC, which is the project management committee, which solves technical and administrative issues with package source and handles creating the branches. There's package-bug-handler, which maintains the NATS instance they use to track problem reports and maintainers in package source. The package source security group, which tracks security issues for packages and informs maintainers about them and gets the fixes pushed and so on. The package source WIP, which is a work in progress, which is where they work on building the next snapshot and testing packages. And the membership executive committee, which handles all NetBSD membership issues, like adding or removing developers, cleaning up people who are inactive, and so on. The NetBSD board, which is the legal and financial oversight of the NetBSD Foundation and deals with technical issues and so on. Many other teams, including core, admins, finance exec, release engineering package source, W, Concom, and probably others that he forgot about.
Well, that's an interesting insight.
I like the slide tool he was using for this. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, I like this cube, where each slide is a side of the cube. It almost looks like.
And lastly, we have VBSDCon. The list of speakers has been announced. It's here somewhere. There it is.
It's on the speakers. Yeah, there's no schedule yet, but it's coming.
There's a draft schedule. It's just not finalized yet.
Uh-huh.
But it's basically these people in an order. It doesn't really matter, does it?
They talk.
Yeah. So the keynotes will be Paul Vixie talking about DNS over HTTPS and Colin Percival talking about 23 years of software side channel attacks against processors, like the Meltdown Inspector type stuff. Then the main talks will include John Baldwin talking about doing TLS encryption in the kernel, like how Netflix does it. Connor Beh will talk about FreeBSD at work, building network and storage infrastructure using pfSense and FreeNAS. Michael Dexter will talk about ZFS performance across 6 different operating systems. So looking at the OpenZFS code running on Linux, NetBSD, FreeBSD, Illumos, Windows, and OS X. Dave Frillard will talk about transitioning from a FreeNAS user to being a FreeBSD user, and becoming more and more technical, basically. I'm going to give my Explain Like I'm 5 how ZFS caching works talk.
Oh yeah, from FOSDEM.
Since that's not ever actually been done at a BSD conference yet. Michael Lucas, as we mentioned before, will give his 20 years in jails, talking about FreeBSD jails then and now. Kurt Mosjek will talk about the care and feeding of OpenBSD porters, and in general, growing the team of people that keep all the third-party software working on our favorite operating systems. Aaron Poffenberger will talk about his Road Warrior disaster recovery system, how to secure, synchronize, and back up your laptop so that if it gets damaged, lost, stolen, or seized, you'll be able to continue your work and not lose your information. Benedict Reuscheling,
oh, that guy,
whoever that is, will be replacing an Oracle database with FreeBSD, OpenZFS, and Postgres. And Sean Webb will give the state of the hardened union. And there's also a kind of a workshop-y thing, and we're not entirely sure how that's going to work on the schedule yet, but will actually be, I think, a 3-hour thing going through how to actually port software to OpenBSD.
That seems like something for everyone. And this is happening in the Hyatt Regency Reston in Washington. And VeriSign is organizing that or helping to organize. There is also a couple of people involved, not just you with the paper selection program committee. There's usual suspects Dan Langell, Ryan Steinmetz, and Mark Felder in the organizing committee.
Yeah, there's the organizing committee that actually run the conference, and then the program committee was them plus myself, Pamela Moschek, and Michael Shirk.
Okay. So yeah, it's not just a single person, which is always good. There's some help. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you at VBSDCon. There's also a one-day hackathon on the 5th, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And that's pretty much open, not just for FreeBSD developers.
It says invite only on the registration page.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay, well, the details are on the website.
If that should be changed, somebody needs to tell Dan. Anyway, you can register now. If you register before August 15th, you get $25 off the cost. So register now, and it will be cheaper.
Early birds, yeah.
There's also a link for the group rate at the hotel.
Yeah, so you can stay at the hotel where the conference is and can stay and talk to people that are at the conference longer without having to rush out to catch a bus or something to another hotel. Okay, that's very exciting. And again, VBSDCon is only every other year. It's alternating with MeetBSD.
Yes. So if you're on the East Coast, this is the only chance you're going to have until 2021 to come out to a local conference. So, make the effort.
Yeah. All right. Now it's time for our feedback and questions this week. And as always, we ask you to send us feedback at feedback@bsdnow.tv. Anything that's on your mind in the BSD area, questions, comments, any interesting stories that you found. And the questions will be put into that section. And of course, we answer them as well. So the first one is from Pat about Nice Bug August 7th. This is an announcement here. That's a video on OpenBSD. Andrew Bushbecker? Whoa, almost a tongue twister there. There's the Nice Bug website, which has more information. That's easier, I guess. And that's on August 7th. So by the time you watch this episode, or it comes out, it's just another week away. And yeah, the abstract for that is Andrew selects his video production software based on free licensing, portability, ease of installation, compatibility with OpenBSD, usability, and whether it accomplishes whatever he wants to do. Videos are consequently produced on OpenBSD with Vim, Make, FFmpeg, Make, Verge, MPV, SOX, Glottoggle, OrCat, BC, Fossil, a lot of other software, and custom Unix-style utilities. Competence with such portable video editing software has come in handy when needing to use GNU Linux and Windows. Andrew will touch on many parts of the video production process, including planning, recording, editing video streams, editing audio streams, composition of subtitles, translation of subtitles, encoding, publishing, and version control. Oh, that's interesting for the people who also want to do that on Unix and learn about the tools and what's involved. Yeah, so don't miss that. And I guess the Nice Bug ones are not just streamed, but also recorded.
There's live streaming via Skeleton, but also the recordings, which they'll post after.
Okay, thank you, Pat, for that. If you send us something about a BSD user group meeting or something that's coming up, remember to send this not just the week before our next recording, because by that time the recording comes out, we're kind of either too late already or it's just a few days away and a couple of people want to plan this out a little bit longer. So send this early enough.
Yeah, so on top of the fact that sometimes it takes us a while to get to the feedback, and that sometimes we record a week ahead of time to cover conferences and stuff, which there are a lot of coming up, we also have the problem that people don't necessarily watch the show the day it comes out. So yes, the sooner you can tell us about your event, the better, and we will get it in the show.
Exactly, yeah. Okay, now that this is out the door, Tyler is next with SSH keys versus passwords. Okay, Tyler writes, question. In your opinion, is using a really long random password to log into a server via SSH and not using key authentication a good idea? I have an OpenBSD server with a pretty good SSH guard policy. My username is hard to guess and all other logins are disallowed. Am I pretty safe or should I just set up keys? So my reply is use keys.
I still allow passwords in my use cases in a couple places because sometimes I'm on a machine that doesn't have my key.
Yes, yeah, some kiosk systems or...
There's always at least one account somewhere that I can get into with just a long password because, locking yourself out isn't a great solution either. Sometimes the best is actually to do some kind of two-factor, like with the Duo security module, where you can get a phone call or something to verify the login before it finishes. I have to do that with one of the VPNs I use at a customer. After I enter my username and password, it then asks for a second password where I type the word phone, and then my phone rings, and I have to answer it and press a certain key to verify that it's actually me trying to log in. Or another one where you use Google Authenticator. So in addition to your password or key or whatever you're using, you also have to put in a temporary code.
Yeah, I think you're pretty good already on the security. At least you're thinking about it and don't just run the SSH server without fiddling some of the configs or doing some crazy stuff like, oh, let's just move the SSH port to another port so maybe no one will find out. They will. They just find out that it's not on port 22 anymore, but on, 2222. So that's not a help. But with SSH guard, and I think you should be fine, depending on whether that system is being scanned continuously since it's on the internet, or if it's just an internet server, that should also be less likely to be attacked. All right, yeah, so that's Tyler with SSH. And last but not least is Lars with Tor Talk. So Lars found, or writes to us, "Hi Alan, Benedict, and JT. The string BSD Now turns up in this message in the Tor Talk archives." Oh, should I be worried?
Yes, basically they're complaining about one of the Tor nodes happen to have BSD Now in the name. It's most likely because we used to have a tutorial on our website, or technically it's still on the old website, but yes, we had a tutorial on how to set up a Tor relay, and the example happened to call the relay BSD Now. So I think over the years, there have been, 100 different Tor nodes that happen to have BSD Now in the name somewhere. Definitely has nothing to do with me personally, but yes.
Okay, so I guess people followed that tutorial a little bit too much to the point and didn't think of replacing some of the strings that you put in there as examples.
In particular, this is someone saying that the Tor exit relay BSD Now 2016 is just rerouting traffic back into the Tor network rather than actually exiting it to the internet. So it uses other exits instead of being an actual exit. This allows it to inspect traffic without having to deal with abuse complaints. I have no evidence that this exit is actually inspecting traffic. They basically reported it to the bad relay list.
Oh, okay, so it's kind of blocked or blacklisted. It has nothing to do with us. It's just someone having used our tutorial and was careless, I guess. All right, but thanks for the info. We'll try to make sure that if we have, now we have tutorials that are from people's blogs, then it's less likely that this will happen again. But it's less of a problem, I guess, since it's blacklisted. All right, that pretty much covers this week's episode. Thank you for listening in, and see you next week.